Hey everyone, you know those days when you just can't seem to get going? Well, we're diving into something that might help. It's called Motivation is Easy, actually.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of this. It's supposed to be really practical.
That's the idea. We'll see if it lives up to the hype. So we've got the article right here, and it makes a pretty bold claim right off the bat, saying that motivation is, get this, easier than we think.
Hmm, interesting. I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, it's all about this thing they call the motivation cycle.
Mhm.
Basically, the idea is that you don't wait around for motivation to hit you.
You know what? I actually do that. I wait for that motivation to strike, but it's so rare.
It's like waiting for lightning to strike, right? But this cycle thing is more about taking action, even a small one, to kind of jumpstart the whole process. Like, have you ever noticed how just tidying up your desk can make you feel like tackling a bigger task?
Okay, yeah, I've totally felt that. It's like one thing leads to another.
Exactly. And the article explains that it all ties back to our brain's reward system, that dopamine hit we get.
Makes sense. It's like we get a little reward for even tiny wins.
And that little win, even if it's just a clean desk, makes us want to feel good again. So we're more likely to keep going.
It's a cycle, just like they said. I like it.
So instead of waiting around, we can actually trigger our own motivation. Sounds pretty good, right?
Definitely. But how do we actually put this into practice?
Well, that's what I love about this article. It gets super practical. And one of the things it suggests is actually kind of counterintuitive setting, what they call ridiculously easy goals.
Ridiculously easy. Like what? Aiming to get out of bed in the morning? Some of us struggle with that one.
Uh-huh, right. I know, it sounds funny, but they actually give the example of, like, if you want to write a novel, don't focus on the whole thing, just aim to write one sentence.
Just one sentence, huh? I can see where they're going with this.
The idea is that when the goal feels so achievable, we're less likely to get bogged down by resistance or fear of failure.
Which is usually what stops me right at the beginning.
Totally. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with.
Definitely. I think we've all been there. But I can see how this simple shift could make a difference.
Right. Like getting started is often the hardest part. And that's where these ridiculously easy goals come in. They help us take those first few steps, build some momentum, and, well, hopefully keep going.
It's like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
Exactly. Or in this case, maybe just a single sentence.
Hmm.
So we've been talking about these like ridiculously easy goals as a way to kind of kickstart motivation. But then the article takes it a step further. It's like, what if we could actually make motivation itself a habit?
Oh, that's interesting because who actually wakes up motivated, right?
Right. It's like some mythical creature.
Totally.
But thinking about it like a habit, it's like we don't wait for inspiration to brush our teeth.
Yeah, that's true. We just do it. It's part of the routine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do we get to that point with like pursuing our goals or just tackling things we find challenging?
Well, the article dives into, the whole neuroscience of habit formation, which is actually really cool. Basically, every time we repeat something, we're creating these pathways in our brains, making it easier to do it again.
So it's like the more we do something, the less we have to think about it. It just becomes automatic.
Exactly. It's like imagine walking through a forest, right?
Yeah.
If you keep taking the same path, it becomes more defined, easier to follow.
Oh, I like that.
Right. It's the same with our brains. Repetition is key.
So if we want to make motivation a habit, what do we do? Just start doing things we want to be motivated for, even when we don't feel like it.
It's a bit more nuanced than that. The article talks about things like choosing a consistent time and place for the activity you're trying to make a habit. Like, let's say you want to write regularly.
Okay, I like writing.
So maybe you decide every morning at 8 a.m., I'm going to sit at my desk and write for 30 minutes.
So it's almost like creating a trigger, like a reminder.
Exactly. You're creating these cues for your brain, making it easier to slip into that habit.
That makes a lot of sense. Oh, and speaking of things that make sense, can we talk about the short bursts and finding your spike things? Those really caught my attention.
Yeah, those are great. Short bursts first.
Yeah, let's do that one.
Okay, so short bursts is about working really intentionally, but for shorter periods of time. Like instead of trying to power through something for hours, you work for maybe 20 minutes, super focused, then take a break.
So it's kind of like acknowledging that our brains aren't meant for these marathon focus sessions.
Totally. Our energy naturally ebbs and flows throughout the day. It's about working with that, not against it.
I actually tried something similar when I was writing, I think it was my last research paper, and I was surprised by how much more I got done.
Right. It's a game changer for a lot of people. And
Yeah.
then finding your spike, which is totally different.
Yeah, that one really stood out to me too. Can you refresh my memory on that one again?
Basically, it's about tuning into what truly energizes you, even if it seems a little random or maybe niche to other people. The article used the example of someone who was super passionate about, of all things, organizing.
Organizing. Okay, I wouldn't have guessed that.
Right. But the point is that when you find those things, those activities that you genuinely love, it doesn't feel like work.
It's like that saying, do what you love, and you'll never work a day in your life.
Exactly. It's about finding those things that light you up, because that's where your motivation will naturally flow.
So finding that spike, that thing that really gets us going, that's key. But what about those times when, well, we just have to buckle down and do things that we might not be super passionate about? Like, is there anything we can do to make those tasks feel less, I don't know, dreadful?
Absolutely. And the article actually addresses that. It talks about the power of creating a motivating environment, which I think is really cool.
Okay, so like, what does that look like? Am I supposed to deck out my workspace like it's a motivational poster factory?
Not necessarily. It can be much simpler than that. It's more about being intentional about the visual cues you surround yourself with, things that inspire you. So maybe it's a few, quotes that resonate with you or images that spark your creativity.
Okay, I can see that, having things around that kind of give you a little boost. What about music, though? Music is huge for me, especially when I need to get focused or pumped up.
Totally.
Yep,
And
yeah.
music is so powerful for setting the mood. The article talks about that too. Create playlists that energize you, or maybe something calming if that's what you need to focus.
It's like having your own personal soundtrack for whatever you're working on. I love that.
It makes a big difference. And, before we rack up this whole motivation deep dive, I think it's important to touch on one last point the article makes, which is about celebrating our wins.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. We've definitely got to celebrate those victories.
It's easy to get caught up in the hustle, the striving for the next big thing, that we forget to acknowledge how far we've come, even with the small
So we
wins.
shouldn't wait for like those huge milestones to celebrate.
Exactly. Celebrate everything. It doesn't matter how small it might seem. Acknowledge those wins because that positive reinforcement, it goes a long way in keeping us motivated.
It's like giving ourselves a pat on the back, right? Like, hey, we're doing good. Keep it up.
Exactly. Positive reinforcement is so powerful.
I love it. Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into motivation. I feel like I've got a whole new perspective on it now and some really practical strategies I can start using right away.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, even small changes can make a big difference.
Totally. Well, thanks for joining me on this journey into motivation. It's been a pleasure as always.
The pleasure was all mine. And to everyone listening, good luck out there with your own motivation adventures.